If you've been scrolling through endless listings, weighing core counts against memory, and still feel stuck wondering whether a refurbished workstation is worth the gamble, you're not alone. I've spent the last week setting up a Dell Precision T7920, running a couple of real-world projects to see if the hype matches the day-to-day grind. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What I found is a mix of solid professional chops and a few hidden trade-offs that most shoppers don't spot until the box is open. First off, the T7920 isn't trying to be a gaming beast. It's a workstation built for engineers, architects, and content creators who need reliability over flash. The thing that initially caught my eye was the combination of a 10-core Intel Xeon at 2.2 GHz, 128 GB of RAM, and an NVIDIA Quadro M4000. Those three pieces alone tell you the machine is aimed at sustained workloads. Think rendering a 3-minute 4K animation or running large finite element simulations. When you pair that with a 500 GB SSD for the OS and apps and a 2 TB SATA drive for bulk data, you get a clear separation. The SSD handles the responsiveness, while the HDD is the vault for assets. Now, the practical side of that setup is what matters most. I installed a full Autodesk Revit project, a couple of SolidWorks assemblies, and Premiere Pro timelines. On the Revit file, loading times dropped from roughly 2 minutes on my older desktop to under 30 seconds. The M4000, while not the newest RTX card, still accelerated viewport performance enough that I could rotate complex models without the usual lag spikes. In Premiere, the 128 GB of RAM meant I could have multiple 8-track sequences open, apply Lumetri color corrections, and still keep the timeline playback smooth. The SSD's speed really shone when opening the Adobe Suite, cutting startup time to a fraction of what I'm used to. But those wins come with some practical compromises. Because this is a renewed unit, the warranty is typically 90 days, which is shorter than the 1-year coverage you'd get on a brand new workstation. That's not a deal breaker if you're comfortable with a brief return window, but it's worth noting for anyone who relies on absolute uptime. The chassis itself is a classic tower with a silver finish, functional, not flashy. It's a bit bulky, so fitting it into a small office or a cramped home studio can be a squeeze. The power supply is adequate for the stock configuration, but if you ever think about adding another GPU or expanding beyond the stock storage, you might need to upgrade the PSU yourself, which adds a bit of extra cost and effort. Another hidden trade-off is the cooling system. The Xeon's thermal design power sits at 95 W, and the workstation comes with a standard Dell blower fan. In my tests, under continuous rendering loads, the fans ramped up to a noticeable whine. It's not obnoxious, but if you're sensitive to noise, say you have a shared workspace or you stream your workflow live, this could be a point of friction. The good news is the chassis has easy toe access panels, so swapping in a quieter aftermarket cooler is doable if you're comfortable opening the case. Who should walk away from this machine? If you're a freelance graphic designer who primarily uses Photoshop and Illustrator, you'll likely find the T7920 overkill. A mid-range laptop or a consumer-grade desktop would give you more bang for the buck. Similarly, gamers looking for high frame rates will miss the newer RTX features and DLSS support that the M4000 lacks. The workstation also isn't the best fit for those who need the absolute latest GPU compute. If you're doing heavy AI training or need CUDA cores beyond what the M4000 offers, you'll want a newer RTX A-series card. On the flip side, the sweet spot for this system is professionals who need consistent performance on CPU-bound tasks and a GPU that's certified for ISV applications. Think of a civil engineer running AutoCAD Civil 3D, a video post-production house needing to encode multiple 4K streams simultaneously, or a scientific researcher crunching data sets in MATLAB. The 128 GB of ECC-enabled RAM gives you the headroom to keep large data sets in memory without swapping, which translates directly into productivity gains. And because it's a Dell Precision, you also get the Dell Optimizer software that can profile your workloads and tweak power settings automatically, something that can save you time fiddling with BIOS menus. Value for money is where the T7920 really starts to shine. New workstation builds with comparable specs easily push past the $4,000 mark, especially when you factor in professional-grade GPUs and ECC memory. The renewed listing brings that configuration down to a price that, even after accounting for the shorter warranty, still feels like a bargain for a machine that can sit in a studio for years without becoming obsolete. The key is to be clear about your use case. If you'll actually tap into the 128 gigabytes of RAM and the Xeon's multi-core strength, you're squeezing out the most value. If you end up running only a single Photoshop window and a few browser